Jake Turner never imagined that one split-second decision on a storm-ravaged pier would change his entire life. When he dove into the black, churning waters of Clearwater Bay to save a drowning mother and child, he had no idea who they were. He didn't wait for thanks. He didn't leave his name. But the next morning, when a gleaming yacht appeared at his dock, he discovered that some acts of heroism come with rewards beyond imagination. Stay with me until the end, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The first drops of rain hit the wooden planks of Clearwater Bay Marina at exactly 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday evening that Jake Turner would never forget. He'd been working the docks for 3 years now, ever since his world had collapsed in on itself like a house of cards in a hurricane. The work was simple, honest, and required little thought, which was exactly what he needed. Fix the boats, tie the lines, collect the paycheck, go home to his daughter, repeat. But that Tuesday, the universe had other plans. Jake stood at the edge of Pier 7, his weathered hands coiling a thick mooring rope with the kind of practiced efficiency that comes from doing the same task 1,000 times. At 34, he looked older, the kind of older that comes not from years but from loss. His dark hair, perpetually in need of a cut, was pushed back from his face, revealing the worry lines that had carved themselves into his forehead since Emily's death. His broad shoulders, once carried with the confidence of a man who believed the world made sense, now slumped slightly forward, as if bracing against an invisible wind that never stopped blowing. "Turner, you clocking out or planning to sleep here?" Tommy Rodriguez called from the harbor master's office, his round face barely visible through the rain-streaked window. Jake glanced at his watch, a cheap digital thing that had replaced the nice one he'd sold 2 years ago when Sarah needed braces. "5 more minutes," he called back. "Just want to secure the Bennett boat. Storm's supposed to get worse." Tommy shook his head, disappearing back into the warm glow of the office. Jake didn't mind. Tommy was a good guy, but he didn't understand why Jake always volunteered for the extra work, why he was always the last to leave. The truth was simple and complicated at the same time. Being at the docks meant not being in his too-quiet apartment, where Emily's absence still echoed in every room, even after 4 years. It meant his hands stayed busy and his mind stayed quiet. The rain intensified, shifting from a drizzle to a downpour in the span of a heartbeat. Jake pulled up the hood of his worn canvas jacket and moved along the pier, checking cleats and lines with the thoroughness of a man who understood that the sea didn't care about your problems. It only cared whether you respected it. Thunder cracked across the sky, so loud and close that Jake felt it in his chest. The bay, usually calm and welcoming, had transformed into something prehistoric and angry. Waves slapped against the pier pilings with increasing violence, sending spray high enough to miss Jake's face. He tasted salt and rain. That's when he heard it. At first, he thought it was just another roll of thunder, or maybe the sound of a boat breaking loose from its mooring. But then it came again, clearer this time, cutting through the storm like a knife through silk. A scream. Jake's head snapped up, his body going rigid. His eyes scanned the marina, trying to locate the source. The parking lot? The boat slips? His blood turned to ice. Headlights. In the water. About 50 yards out from the main pier, sinking fast into the black water of the bay, a car's headlights glowed like the eyes of a drowning beast. Even as Jake watched, paralyzed for a precious half-second by the sheer impossibility of what he was seeing, the lights tilted forward and began to dim. Someone had driven off the pier. Later, investigators would determine that the driver had been unfamiliar with the marina's layout, that the storm had reduced visibility to nearly zero, and that the wooden barrier at the pier's end had rotted through in the relentless salt air. But in that moment, Jake didn't know any of this. All he knew was that someone was in that car, and that car was sinking, and he was the only one close enough to do anything about it. "Tommy, call 911!" Jake's voice ripped from his throat as he ran, his boots pounding against the wet wood. "Car in the water!" He didn't wait to see if Tommy heard him. He didn't think about the fact that it was March, and the water temperature was probably 50 degrees. He didn't think about Sarah, or what would happen to her if he didn't come back up. He didn't think about the last time he'd been in water like this, holding Emily's hand as the light left her eyes. He just ran, and then he jumped. The cold hit him like a physical blow, driving the air from his lungs and making his muscles seize. For a moment he was underwater, disoriented by the darkness and the shock. Then his survival instincts kicked in, and he broke the surface, gasping and swimming hard toward the sinking car. The rain hammered down, making it almost impossible to see. Each wave pushed him back, and his boots, stupid, he should have kicked them off, felt like anchors on his feet. But Jake had grown up on these waters. His father had been a fisherman, and before Emily, before Sarah, before everything had gone to hell, Jake had spent every free moment on a boat. The sea was in his blood, even if he'd tried to forget it. 20 yards. 15. 10. The car was a dark sedan, expensive looking, even in its death throes. It was sinking front first, the hood already completely submerged, water pouring in through gaps in the windows. Jake could see movement inside now, shadows thrashing against the glass. "Hold on," he shouted, though he knew they probably couldn't hear him over the storm. "I'm coming." 5 yards. 3. Jake reached the car just as water began spilling over the window ledges. He grabbed onto the door handle, trying to yank it open, but the water pressure was already too great. The door wouldn't budge. That's when he saw her face. A woman, mid-30s, with terror carved into every feature. Her mouth was open in a scream that Jake couldn't hear through the glass and the storm. Her hands were pressed against the window, fingers splayed. And in the back seat, barely visible through the rain and the darkness and the water, a child. A little boy, maybe 6 or 7, his face pressed against the rear window. The woman's eyes met Jake's, and in that moment, he saw everything. The desperate hope, the crushing fear, the unbearable knowledge that she was about to die and couldn't save her child. "The window!" Jake shouted, gesturing frantically. "Break the window!" But she was too panicked, or didn't understand, or didn't have anything to break it with. The water was at her shoulders now, rising fast. In the back seat, the boy's head tilted back as he fought to keep his face above the waterline. Jake made a decision. He took a deep breath and dove, swimming down along the side of the sinking car. His hands found what he was looking for. His belt. The heavy leather belt with the steel buckle that Sarah had gotten him last Father's Day, the one with "World's Best Dad" engraved on the back. He yanked it free from his waist and surfaced, treading water as he wrapped the buckle end around his fist. "Close your eyes," he shouted at the woman. "Turn away." She understood that. She grabbed her son, pulling him down below the water level, which was now up to her chin, and turned her body to shield him. Jake swung the belt buckle against the driver's side window with every ounce of strength he had. The first hit did nothing. The second produced a small star-shaped crack. The third, the window exploded in a shower of safety glass. Water immediately began rushing in even faster, and the car lurched downward. Jake had seconds, maybe less. He reached through the broken window, his hands finding the woman's arm. "Come on, now!" But she wasn't moving toward him. She was pushing something toward him instead. The boy. Through the churning water and broken glass, she shoved her son toward the window, toward Jake, toward air and life and survival. The child's small body tumbled through the opening, and Jake caught him, one arm wrapping around the tiny chest, even as his other hand reached back for the mother. "Your turn, come on!" The woman's hand found his, their fingers locking together. Jake pulled, straining against the suction of the sinking car. She was halfway through the window when the sedan pitched forward violently, dragging them all down. Water closed over Jake's head. His lungs, already burning from the cold and exertion, screamed for air. The boy in his arm thrashed weakly. He'd already swallowed water, was probably choking. Jake couldn't see anything now, couldn't tell which way was up, could only feel the woman's hand slipping from his grasp as the car pulled her down into the darkness. No, not again. Not like Emily. Jake's foot found something, the car's roof maybe, or the door frame, and he pushed off with every bit of strength left in his body. He kicked upward, his free arm wrapped tight around the boy, his other hand still gripping the woman's wrist, refusing to let go, refusing to lose someone else to the water. They broke the surface together. Jake gasped, coughed, nearly went under again. His legs were cramping from the cold, and his lungs felt like they were full of broken glass. But he had them both, the mother and the boy, both alive. "Swim," he choked out. "Have to swim." But the woman was barely conscious, and the boy wasn't moving at all. Jake did something he hadn't done in 4 years. He prayed. Then he started swimming. Later, he wouldn't remember the details. The way his body moved on pure instinct, keeping all three of them afloat. The sound of sirens cutting through the storm. The lights of the emergency vehicles painting the rain red and blue and white. The moment strong hands reached down from the pier and pulled the boy from his arms, then the woman, then finally him. He collapsed on the wooden planks, water pouring from his clothes, his entire body shaking so violently he couldn't control it. Someone, a paramedic, he thought, threw a blanket over his shoulders and shined a light in his eyes. Sir, can you hear me? What's your name?" "Jake," he managed through chattering teeth. "The boy, is he—" "They're working on him now. You did good, Jake. You did real good." Through the chaos of emergency personnel, Jake could see a cluster of paramedics around the small form of the boy, performing CPR. 1 compression, 2, 3. "Come on, kid. Come on." And then, a cough. Water expelled from small lungs, a gasp, a cry. The boy was alive. Relief crashed over Jake with such force that he nearly passed out. He slumped back against the pier, his eyes closing. "We need to get you to the hospital," the paramedic was saying. "You've got hypothermia and—" "I'm fine," Jake interrupted, though he was anything but. "The woman, the mother, is she—" "She's breathing, unconscious, but breathing. We're loading her into the ambulance now." Jake forced his eyes open, forced himself to focus. Through the crowd, he could see them lifting a gurney into the ambulance. The woman lay still, her wet hair plastered to her face. Even from here, even through the rain and chaos, he could see she was beautiful. But that wasn't what caught his attention. It was the clothes. The jewelry that glinted on her wrist even under the harsh emergency lights. The designer shoes that one of the paramedics had removed. This wasn't just anyone they'd pulled from the bay. This was someone with money. A lot of money. "Sir, we need to get your information," another paramedic said, approaching with a clipboard. "For our report. Can you tell me your full name and—" But Jake was already moving, peeling off the blanket and stumbling to his feet. His legs threatened to give out, but he forced them to hold. "Sir, you really should—" "I have to go," Jake said. "My daughter. I need to check on my daughter." It wasn't entirely a lie. Sarah was with Mrs. Chen next door, but she'd be expecting him home soon. And the truth was, Jake couldn't stand the thought of paperwork, of questions, of people calling him a hero when all he'd done was what anyone would do. What he should have done 4 years ago, when Emily had fallen overboard during that storm, and he'd been just a second too slow, a moment too late. He slipped away into the rain before anyone could stop him, moving through the shadows at the edge of the emergency lights. Tommy caught sight of him and started to call out, but Jake held up a hand, a gesture that somehow communicated both "I'm okay" and "please don't." And Tommy, good guy that he was, nodded and looked away. Jake made it to his truck, an ancient Ford that barely ran, and collapsed into the driver's seat. His hands shook so badly it took 3 tries to get the key in the ignition. As he pulled out of the parking lot, he caught one last glimpse in his rearview mirror. The ambulance doors closing, red lights spinning, carrying the mother and son away to safety. He'd done it. They were alive. Both of them. So why did he feel like he was drowning? The drive home took 15 minutes, though Jake didn't remember most of it. He moved on autopilot, his brain still stuck in that moment underwater, feeling the woman's hand slipping from his, knowing he was about to lose them both. But he hadn't. This time, he hadn't. Mrs. Chen took one look at him when he knocked on her door and gasped. "Jake, what happened? You're soaked." "Fell in the bay," he said, managing something approximating a smile. "Stupid accident. Is Sarah asleep?" "Out like a light an hour ago." Mrs. Chen's eyes narrowed, seeing through the lie but gracious enough not to call him on it. "She's on the couch. I'll help you carry her." "I got her. Thanks for watching her, Mrs. Chen." He scooped his 9-year-old daughter into his arms, marveling as he always did at how much she looked like Emily. Same dark curls, same small nose, same way of frowning slightly in her sleep, like she was working through complicated math problems in her dreams. "You're cold, Daddy," Sarah murmured without opening her eyes, instinctively burrowing closer to his chest. "I know, baby. Let's get you home." Their apartment was only 2 doors down, a small two-bedroom in a building that had seen better decades. Jake had tried to make it cheerful, but there was only so much you could do with hand-me-down furniture and walls that hadn't been painted since the 80s. Still, it was theirs. It was home. He tucked Sarah into her bed, pulling the blanket up to her chin. She grabbed his hand before he could pull away. "You smell like the ocean," she whispered, still half asleep. "I was working on the boat slate," he said softly. "Go back to sleep." "Did you catch any fish?" Despite everything, the cold that had settled into his bones, the exhaustion that threatened to pull him under, the images of terrified eyes behind sinking glass, Jake smiled. "No fish tonight, sweetheart, but maybe this weekend we can go to the pier and try our luck. Would you like that?" "Mm-hmm." Sarah's eyes were already closed again. "Love you, Daddy. Love you too, baby girl. More than anything in this world." He stood there for a long moment, watching her sleep, letting the simple peace of her breathing remind him why he was still here, why he got up every morning, why he kept going, for her. Always for her. Jake took a shower so hot it made his skin burn, trying to drive the chill from his body. He stood under the spray until the water heater gave up and went cold, then stood there for a few minutes more, letting his mind finally process what had happened. He'd saved them. A mother and her son. He jumped into the freezing bay without a second thought and pulled them both from a sinking car. Part of him, the part that still woke up screaming some nights, reliving the moment he'd lost Emily, couldn't quite believe it had worked, that he'd been fast enough, strong enough, that fate had decided to let him win one for once. But he had. They were alive because of him. Jake toweled off and fell into bed, not bothering with dinner even though he couldn't remember when he'd last eaten. Sleep took him almost instantly, dragging him down into dreams of dark water and reaching hands and headlights sinking into an abyss that had no bottom. He didn't dream about the morning, didn't dream about what was coming, didn't dream about the gleaming white yacht that would change everything. But morning came anyway, as it always does, whether you're ready for it or not. The alarm clock's shrill beeping dragged Jake from a restless sleep at 5:30 a.m., the same as every morning. He slapped at it blindly, his body protesting every movement. Every muscle ached. His shoulders felt like someone had taken a baseball bat to them, and his lungs burned with each breath. For a confused moment, he couldn't figure out why he felt like he'd been hit by a truck. Then the memories flooded back. The storm, the scream, the sinking car, those terrified eyes behind the glass. Jake sat up slowly, running his hands through his hair. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, actual sunlight, which seemed impossible after last night's deluge. He checked his phone out of habit. No missed calls. No messages. The world had kept turning while he'd pulled two people from death's grip, utterly indifferent to the miracle and the terror of it all. He showered quickly, the hot water doing little to ease the stiffness in his muscles, and dressed in his usual work clothes, faded jeans, a dark blue Henley, and his backup jacket since his other one was still soaked and crumpled on the bathroom floor. In the kitchen, he started the coffee maker and began assembling Sarah's lunch with the efficiency of long practice. Peanut butter and jelly, apple slices, carrots that she probably wouldn't eat, but he packed anyway, a juice box and the last two cookies from the package. "Daddy?" Sarah's voice came from the hallway, small and worried. "Are you okay?" Jake turned to find his daughter standing in her pajamas, her dark curls a wild halo around her face. Her brown eyes, Emily's eyes, were fixed on him with an intensity that sometimes unnerved him. Sarah had always been perceptive beyond her years, probably because she'd had to be. When you lost your mother at 5 years old, you learned to read the adults around you, to gauge whether their "I'm fine" was real or just another lie told to protect you. "I'm okay, sweetheart," Jake said, and this time it wasn't entirely untrue. He was alive. He was standing. That counted for something. "Why are you up so early?" "I heard you making noise. You sound different when you breathe." Jake forced his expression to stay neutral. "Just a little sore from work. Come on, let's get you some breakfast." They fell into their morning routine. Cereal for Sarah, black coffee for Jake, the small TV in the corner playing cartoons at low volume. Jake watched his daughter eat, her legs swinging under the chair, and felt the familiar weight of overwhelming love mixed with crushing inadequacy. He was doing his best, but was his best enough? Could he ever give her the life she deserved? Mrs. Chen said you fell in the water last night, Sarah said suddenly, not looking up from her bowl. Jake hesitated. He'd always tried to be honest with Sarah, but he also didn't want to scare her. I did. I'm fine, though. See? All dry now. Did you save someone? His hand froze halfway to his coffee mug. What? Mrs. Chen said you were all wet, and you smelled like the ocean, and you looked like you did after Mom. Sarah's voice dropped to barely a whisper on that last word. So I thought maybe you saved someone, like you tried to save her. Jake's throat tightened. He set down his mug carefully and moved to kneel beside his daughter's chair. Hey, look at me. When she did, he saw tears threatening to spill over. Yes, I helped some people last night. A mom and a little boy. They're okay. Everyone's okay, including me. Promise? I promise. He pulled her into a hug, feeling her small arms wrap around his neck. I'm not going anywhere, baby girl. You're stuck with me. She sniffled against his shoulder. Good, because you're the only parent I have left. The words hit him like a punch to the gut, but he just held her tighter. And you're the only daughter I have, which makes us pretty lucky, I think. We've got each other. After he'd walked Sarah to the bus stop and watched her climb aboard with a wave that was trying very hard to be brave, Jake headed to the marina. The morning was crisp and clear, the storm having scrubbed the sky clean. The bay sparkled in the early light, looking nothing like the black, churning monster from last night. If it weren't for the police tape cordoning off the section of pier where the car had gone through, Jake might have thought he'd dreamed the whole thing. Tommy was already in the harbor master's office, and his eyes went wide when Jake walked in. Jesus Christ, Turner, you're here? Where else would I be? The hospital, the morgue, I don't know. Tommy jumped up from his desk, his coffee sloshing dangerously. Man, what you did last night, that was insane. Insane and incredible. The news crews were here until midnight trying to get information about you. Jake felt his stomach drop. News crews? Yeah, this is a huge story. Local hero saves mysterious woman and child from drowning. They're calling you the ghost rescuer because you disappeared before anyone could get your name. Tommy grinned. I didn't tell them anything, by the way. Figured you had your reasons for bolting. Thanks. Jake moved to the assignment board, checking his tasks for the day. What have you got for me? Tommy stared at him. Are you serious right now? You nearly died last night and you want to talk about work? What I want is to not talk about last night. Jake's voice came out harsher than he intended. He softened it. I'm here. I'm fine. Let's just have a normal day, okay? Tommy studied him for a long moment, then sighed. You're impossible, you know that? Fine. Normal day. Except... He trailed off, his expression shifting to something Jake couldn't quite read. Uncertainty? Excitement? Except what? You should probably head down to Pier 3 first. Why? What's wrong with Pier 3? Tommy's grin returned, wider this time. Nothing's wrong with it. Just go look. Jake felt a prickle of unease, but headed out without further questions. The marina was laid out in a series of piers that extended into the bay like the fingers of a hand. Pier 7, where Jake had been last night, handled the working boats, fishing vessels, tugboats, the occasional small cargo ship. Pier 3 was different. Pier 3 was for the luxury boats, the yachts that cost more than Jake would make in 10 lifetimes. He rounded the corner of the maintenance building and stopped dead in his tracks. At the end of Pier 3, where there had been empty water yesterday, now sat a yacht that made every other boat in the marina look like a child's toy. It was massive, at least 70 feet long, all gleaming white fiberglass and chrome and tinted windows. The kind of vessel that looked like it should be anchored off Monaco or the Caribbean, not at a working marina in Clearwater Bay. The name painted in elegant script on the stern reads Second Chance. Jake stared at it, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. Then he noticed the man standing on the pier beside it. He was tall and impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit that probably cost more than Jake's truck. His silver hair was styled perfectly, and when he noticed Jake approaching, his face split into a professional smile. "Mr. Turner?" the man called out. "Jake Turner?" Every instinct Jake had screamed at him to turn around and walk away. Instead, he found himself moving forward, his boots thudding hollowly on the wooden planks. "Who's asking?" "My name is Richard Chen. I'm the personal assistant to Ms. Olivia Grant." The man extended his hand, and Jake shook it automatically. Richard's grip was firm, his palm soft, the hand of someone who'd never done a day of manual labor in his life. "Ms. Grant would very much like to speak with you. She's waiting aboard." "Look, I don't know what this is about." "Yes, you do." Richard's smile never wavered, but his eyes were sharp. "You saved Ms. Grant's life last night, and her son's. She's been searching for you since the moment she regained consciousness." Jake's mouth went dry. The woman. The beautiful woman with the terrified eyes. Of course she was someone important. Of course she had people to track him down. He should have known. "I'm glad she's okay," Jake said carefully. "And the boy. But I need to get to work, so—" "Mr. Turner, Ms. Grant has come a very long way to thank you personally. Surely you can spare 5 minutes?" When Jake hesitated, Richard added, "She's quite insistent, and I should warn you, when Olivia Grant wants something, she tends to get it." Against his better judgment, Jake found himself nodding. 5 minutes. Richard's smile widened. "Excellent. Right this way." The yacht's gangplank felt impossibly steady under Jake's feet, so different from the small boats he was used to. Everything about the vessel screamed money, from the teak decking to the leather seating to the gleaming chrome railings that probably got polished daily. Jake felt acutely aware of his worn clothes, his scuffed boots, the calluses on his hands. "Ms. Grant is on the aft deck," Richard said, leading him through a sliding glass door and into an interior that looked like something from a magazine. Cream-colored leather, dark wood, soft lighting, a full bar in one corner, a flat-screen TV that was bigger than Jake's living room wall. They walked through to the back deck, and there she was. In the chaos of last night, Jake hadn't really seen her. He'd seen terror and desperation, but not her. Now, in the clear morning light, he saw everything. Olivia Grant sat at a small table, a cup of coffee before her, looking out at the bay. She wore a simple white linen shirt and dark pants, her blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She was beautiful, not in the overdone plastic way of people who'd had too much work done, but in a natural, elegant way that suggested good genes and better self-care. But it was her eyes that caught him. Even from here, he could see the bruises underneath them, the exhaustion that makeup couldn't quite hide. And when she turned to look at him, he saw something else, recognition, and a depth of emotion that made him want to run. "Mr. Turner?" she said, her voice soft but steady. She stood and he noticed she moved carefully, like someone who was sore. "Thank you for coming." "I didn't really have much choice," Jake said, then immediately regretted it. "I mean, you did." Olivia took a step toward him, her eyes locked on his. "You could have kept walking. Most people would have, just like you could have kept walking last night when you heard us go into the water." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "Anyone would have done what I did." "But you did it. You dove into freezing water in the middle of a storm. You broke through a car window with your bare hands. You pulled both Eli and me to safety, even when the car was dragging us down." Her voice cracked slightly on her son's name. "The doctor said we would have had maybe 30 more seconds before we drowned. 30 seconds, and you got to us with perhaps 10 to spare." "Is your son okay?" Jake asked, needing to shift the focus away from himself. Olivia's face transformed, a smile breaking through the serious expression. "He's perfect. A little water in the lungs, some bruising, but perfect. He's sleeping below deck right now. The doctors wanted him to stay in the hospital another night for observation, but Eli insisted he was fine, and—" She laughed softly. "When Eli insists on something, he usually gets his way. Stubborn, like his mother. I'm glad he's okay. He wants to meet you. He's been talking about you non-stop since he woke up. The man who came through the window like a superhero. His words, not mine, though I can't say I disagree with the sentiment." Jake felt his face heat. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy who was in the right place at the right time." A guy who nearly died saving strangers. Olivia took another step closer. Mr. Turner, Jake, just Jake. Jake. She said his name like she was tasting it, committing it to memory. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Why did you leave last night? The paramedics said you disappeared before they could get your information. Tommy at the harbor office said you never stick around for recognition. Why? The question hung in the air between them. Jake could feel Richard somewhere behind him, watching, listening. He could feel the weight of Olivia's gaze, measuring him, trying to understand him. Because it doesn't matter, he said finally. They're alive, that's what matters, not who saved them or why or what happened after. It matters to me. Olivia's voice was fierce now, passionate. It matters to Eli. You gave us back our lives. That's not nothing, Jake. That's everything. Before Jake could respond, a small voice called out from inside the yacht. Mom? Mom, is he here? Olivia's expression softened instantly. We're out here, sweetheart. A moment later, a little boy burst through the sliding glass door, moving with the reckless energy of children who have no concept of their own mortality. He was small for what Jake guessed was 6 or 7, with his mother's blonde hair and wide blue eyes. He wore pajama pants and a t-shirt with a cartoon superhero on it, and when his gaze landed on Jake, those blue eyes went impossibly wider. You're him, the boy breathed. You're the window breaker. Despite everything, Jake felt a smile tug at his lips. I guess I am. The boy, Eli, rushed forward and wrapped his arms around Jake's waist in a hug so tight and unexpected that Jake nearly stumbled. Small hands fisted in his jacket, and he felt the boy trembling slightly. Thank you for saving us, Eli whispered into Jake's shirt. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Jake's hands hovered awkwardly for a moment before settling gently on the boy's shoulders. His throat felt tight. When was the last time someone had hugged him like this? As if he mattered? As if he'd done something that changed the entire world? You're welcome, he managed. You were very brave. Eli pulled back, looking up at him with an expression of pure adoration. I tried to be. Mom said to hold my breath and trust that someone would help us, and then you were there. You broke the window with your belt. That was so cool. Eli, Olivia said gently, remember what we talked about. Mr. Turner, Jake, is probably very busy. We can't keep him all day. But Mom, it's okay, Jake found himself saying, surprising himself. He knelt down so he was eye level with Eli. I'm glad you're okay, buddy. You and your mom. That's the important thing. Are you a real superhero? Eli asked seriously. Do you save people all the time? Jake felt his chest constrict. If only the kid knew. If only he knew about Emily, about how Jake hadn't been able to save the person who mattered most. No, he said quietly. I'm just a regular person who tries to help when I can. That's what superheroes are, Eli insisted. Regular people who help. He turned to his mother. Right, Mom? Olivia's eyes were suspiciously bright as she looked at Jake. Right, sweetheart. Richard cleared his throat politely. Ms. Grant, I apologize for interrupting, but you have that call with Tokyo in 20 minutes. Cancel it, Olivia said without looking away from Jake. Ms. Grant? Richard, cancel it. Reschedule for this evening. I'm not done here. Jake stood up, taking a step back. Look, I appreciate this, but I really do need to get to work. I'm glad you're both okay, truly, but have coffee with me, Olivia said suddenly. Please, just coffee. There's so much I want to say to you, and I can't do it in 5 minutes on a deck. Mom makes really good coffee, Eli offered helpfully. And we have cookies, the fancy kind with chocolate. Jake looked at the boy, then at Olivia, then at the yacht around them. This floating palace that represented a world so far removed from his own, it might as well be on another planet. Every logical part of his brain told him to politely decline and get back to his real life, to not get tangled up with wealthy strangers who would inevitably disappoint him or be disappointed by him. But there was something in Olivia's eyes, a kind of understanding, maybe, or a shared recognition of what it meant to come close to losing everything. And Eli was looking at him like he'd hung the moon and stars. Okay, Jake heard himself say. Coffee. Olivia's smile was radiant. Richard, let Tommy know that Jake will be a bit late this morning. Already done, Ms. Grant. They sat at the table on the aft deck, the morning sun warming the space, the gentle lapping of water against the hull providing a soothing background rhythm. Olivia poured coffee from a French press that probably cost more than Jake's monthly rent, and Eli produced a plate of cookies that were, indeed, very fancy and chocolate-covered. "So," Olivia said, settling into her chair, "tell me about yourself, Jake Turner, and please don't say there's nothing to tell. A man doesn't do what you did without being interesting." Jake wrapped his hands around the coffee cup, grateful for something to do with them. "There's really not much. I work at the marina. I have a daughter, Sarah. She's 9. We live in Clearwater. That's about it." "You're divorced?" The question was gentle, but it still stung. "Widowed 4 years ago." Olivia's expression shifted to something softer, sadder. "I'm sorry. That must be incredibly hard. Some days more than others." Jake took a sip of coffee to avoid having to elaborate. It was, predictably, the best coffee he'd ever tasted. "I'm divorced," Olivia offered. 2 years now. Eli's father decided that being married to someone who worked 80-hour weeks wasn't what he signed up for, even though he knew exactly what he was signing up for when he married the CEO of a shipping company. She shrugged, but Jake could see the hurt underneath. Such is life. "Daddy's a jerk," Eli announced cheerfully through a mouthful of cookie. "But we're better without him, right, Mom?" "Eli, you said so. You said we were better as a team, just us two." Olivia sighed, but she was smiling. "I did say that, and it's true. Though perhaps we shouldn't call people jerks at the breakfast table. Even if they are jerks. Especially if they are jerks." Jake found himself smiling despite the awkwardness of the situation. There was something disarmingly normal about their banter, something that made the yacht and the wealth and the strangeness of it all fade into the background. "What were you doing out here last night?" Jake asked. "During the storm, I mean." Olivia's expression clouded. "Being stupid, mostly. We'd just flown in from New York. I have had business meetings scheduled for today in Clearwater. There's a potential acquisition I'm working on." She paused, took a breath. "The storm came in faster than anyone predicted. My driver said we should wait it out at the airport, but I insisted we push through. I wanted Eli in a proper bed, not sleeping in an airport chair, and I thought, God, I don't even know what I thought, that we'd make it, that it would be fine." "You couldn't have known," Jake said. "Couldn't I? The radar showed the storm. The advisories were clear. I knew better, but I pushed anyway, because that's what I do. I push." Her voice dropped. "I pushed, and I nearly killed us both." "But you didn't." Jake leaned forward, catching her gaze. "You survived. Eli survived. That's what counts. Because of you. Because you kept your head in a crisis. Because you protected your son. Because you fought." Jake surprised himself with the intensity in his own voice. "I was just the assist. You did the hard part." Olivia stared at him for a long moment, and Jake saw her eyes growing glassy. Then she blinked rapidly and looked away, composing herself. "You're very kind." "I'm honest." They sat in silence for a moment, drinking coffee, watching the bay glitter in the morning light. Eli had gotten up to look over the railing, pointing out fish to himself in a running commentary that required no audience. "I want to do something for you," Olivia said finally. "Something meaningful. Not just as a thank you, but as an acknowledgement of the debt I owe you." Jake immediately tensed. "You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything, my life, my son's life, our future." She set down her cup. "I've been making calls since 5 this morning, trying to track you down, trying to learn about you. Do you know what I found?" "I don't think I want to know." "You're being underpaid at the marina, significantly. Tommy speaks very highly of you, says you're the hardest worker he's ever had, that you know boats better than anyone, that you're reliable and skilled and should be making twice what you're earning." Jake's jaw tightened. "That's none of your business." "You're right, it's not. But here's what else I learned. You're a single father raising a daughter on a dock worker's salary. You've been taking every extra shift you can get. You sold your car 2 years ago and now drive a truck that Tommy says breaks down at least once a month. Your apartment is in a building with a reputation for poor maintenance and higher crime rates. She held up a hand when Jake started to protest. I'm not judging, I'm observing. And what I'm observing is a good man doing his absolute best with limited resources. A lot of people are in that situation, Jake said tightly. That doesn't make me special. No. What makes you special is that despite all of that, when you heard someone in trouble, you didn't hesitate. You didn't think about the risk to yourself or what would happen to your daughter if you didn't come back up. You just jumped. Jake stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the deck. I need to go. Please don't. Olivia stood as well, moving around the table. Jake, please, I'm handling this badly. I'm not trying to insult you or make you feel small. I'm trying to help. I don't need help. Everyone needs help sometimes. There's no shame in that. There is when it comes from pity. Jake's voice was harder than he intended. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't need charity from someone I pulled out of the bay. Olivia flinched as if he'd struck her. For a moment, they just stood there, tension crackling between them like electricity. Then Eli's voice cut through it. Don't go, the little boy said, and when Jake turned, he saw that Eli had moved closer, his blue eyes pleading. Please don't go. We just wanted to say thank you, right? We wanted to be nice. And just like that, all of Jake's anger evaporated, leaving only exhaustion in its wake. He crouched down in front of Eli. You are being nice. Both of you. I'm sorry. I'm not good at accepting help or thanks or any of this. Why not? Eli asked with the directness of children who haven't learned that some questions are impolite. Because I'm not used to it, Jake said honestly. And because it makes me feel like maybe I don't deserve it. That's dumb, Eli declared, and despite everything, Jake laughed. You're probably right. He stood up and turned back to Olivia, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. I'm sorry, he said. That was unfair of me. You're trying to do something kind, and I'm being defensive, Olivia finished. Which is understandable. I'm essentially a stranger who showed up at your workplace with a yacht and started poking into your private life. That would make anyone uncomfortable. She smiled slightly. Richard tells me I have a tendency to bulldoze people when I want something. It's a professional asset, but a personal flaw. What do you want? Jake asked quietly. Olivia looked at him for a long moment, then at her son, then back at him. To give you something back. A fraction of what you gave us, but something meaningful. I told you, not charity, an opportunity. She spoke quickly now, the words tumbling out. I own Grant Marine Industries. We operate shipping routes up and down the East Coast, maintain a fleet of over 100 vessels, employ thousands of people, and we're always looking for skilled marine technicians, people who understand boats, who can troubleshoot problems, who can manage maintenance crews. Jake's heart started to beat faster. What are you saying? I'm saying I'd like to offer you a position, fleet maintenance supervisor for our Northeast division. It would mean real benefits, health insurance, retirement plan, paid vacation, and the salary. She named a figure that made Jake's breath catch. It was more than double what he made now, maybe triple. He couldn't find words. That's too much. It's competitive for the position. You'd be managing a team of 15 people, overseeing maintenance on 30 vessels, coordinating with suppliers and contractors. It's real work, Jake. Hard work. I'm not offering you a made-up job to ease my conscience. This is a position I need filled, and based on everything Tommy told me, you're qualified for it. Jake's mind raced. That kind of money would change everything. Sarah could go to a better school. They could move to a safer neighborhood. He could actually save for her college fund instead of just hoping for scholarships. They could have security, stability, the things he'd been desperately trying to provide, but never quite managing. But at what cost? I can't take a job just because you feel grateful, he said. You wouldn't be. You'd be taking a job because you're qualified, and I need someone reliable in that position. Olivia's voice was firm now, businesslike. If you don't work out, I'll fire you. I don't keep people out of sentiment. Ask anyone who's ever worked for me. But I think you will work out. I think you'll be excellent at it. I don't know anything about running a team or managing budgets, or you can learn. We'd provide training. And honestly, the technical knowledge is the hard part. The rest is just organization and communication. She paused. Will you at least think about it? Jake wanted to say no. Wanted to walk away from this impossible offer and get back to his simple, predictable life. But he thought about Sarah. about the way she tried to hide her disappointment when he couldn't afford the field trips, or the new clothes, or the things her friends had. He thought about the worry he saw in her eyes sometimes, the worry that she tried to hide because she didn't want to make him feel bad. "I'll think about it," he heard himself say. Olivia's face lit up. "Really? Really? But I'm not promising anything. I'm not asking for promises, just consideration." She pulled a business card from her pocket. She'd been carrying it this whole time, Jake realized, confident he would say yes. "My direct line is on there. Call me when you've decided, or if you have questions, or if you just need someone to talk through the pros and cons." Jake took the card, the expensive paper stock heavy in his fingers. Olivia Grant, Chief Executive Officer, Grant Marine Industries, a Manhattan address, multiple phone numbers. This was real. This was actually happening. "I should go," he said. "Tommy's going to send a search party." "Of course. Thank you for the coffee and conversation." Eli rushed forward for another hug, and this time Jake was ready for it. He hugged the boy back, feeling the small body relax against him. "Be good for your mom," he said, "and stay away from piers during storms." "I will. Will you come back to visit?" Jake glanced at Olivia, who was watching them with that same soft expression. "Maybe," he said, not wanting to promise something he couldn't deliver. "We'll see." He left the yacht feeling like he'd stepped out of a dream and back into reality. The marina looked the same as it always did: weathered wood, boats of varying quality, the smell of salt and diesel fuel. But Jake felt different, off balance, like the ground had shifted beneath his feet and he hadn't quite found his footing again. Tommy was waiting at the harbor master's office with a knowing grin. "So? How'd it go with the rich lady?" "Fine," Jake said, his voice carefully neutral. "She wanted to thank me, that's all." "Uh-huh. And I suppose that yacht is going to magically vanish into thin air now?" "It's leaving today." "But she'll be back." Jake didn't answer, just grabbed his assignment sheet and headed out to start his work. But Tommy's words echoed in his head as he went through the motions of his day, checking engines, replacing worn lines, patching a hole in a hull. She'll be back. And the question Jake couldn't quite answer was whether he wanted her to be. The yacht was gone by sunset, slipping away from Pier 3 as silently as it had arrived. Jake watched it go from the deck of the fishing boat he was repairing, his hands stilling on the engine he'd been working on. The Second Chance cut through the bay waters with elegant ease, its white hull gleaming gold in the dying light, and then it rounded the breakwater and disappeared from view. Gone. Just like that. Jake should have felt relieved. Instead, he felt a strange hollowness in his chest, like something important had slipped through his fingers before he'd fully grasped what it was. He stayed at the marina until well past dark, finding excuses to tinker with boats that didn't really need tinkering, organizing tools that were already organized. When he finally dragged himself home, Sarah was already asleep, and Mrs. Chen was dozing on his couch with the television playing softly. "Long day," she said when he woke her, not making it a question. "Yeah, sorry I'm late." Mrs. Chen studied him with the piercing gaze of someone who'd raised 6 children and couldn't be fooled by surface-level responses. "You look like a man with something heavy on his mind." "Just tired." "Mm-hmm." She gathered her things, patting his arm as she passed. "Whatever it is, Jake, you'll figure it out. You always do." But as the door closed behind her, Jake wasn't so sure. He pulled Olivia's business card from his pocket, where it had been burning a hole all day. The paper was slightly creased now from being handled, thought about, worried over. He set it on the kitchen counter and stared at it while reheating leftover pasta that tasted like cardboard. The smart thing would be to call her, to take the job. It was more money than he'd ever imagined making, doing work he was qualified for, with benefits that would change Sarah's entire future. Health insurance alone would be life-changing. No more hoping Sarah didn't get sick. No more choosing between taking her to the doctor and paying the electric bill. But something held him back. Pride, maybe? Or fear. The fear that he'd take this job and fail, that he'd prove himself unequal to the task, that Olivia would realize she'd made a mistake offering a position to a simple dock worker out of misplaced gratitude. The fear that he'd uproot his and Sarah's life for something that would fall apart, leaving them worse off than before. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe he was just terrified of owing someone something, of being in debt to a woman he'd pulled from the water, of feeling like he had to perform gratitude for the rest of his life. Jake tossed the pasta in the trash, his appetite gone, and went to check on Sarah. She was sprawled across her bed in the boneless way of sleeping children, one arm hanging off the side, her mouth slightly open. He tucked her arm back under the blanket and smoothed her hair away from her face. "Love you, baby girl," he whispered, and left the card on the kitchen counter untouched. The next day was Saturday, which meant no work and a morning at the pier with Sarah, trying their luck at fishing. It was their ritual, started after Emily died, a way to spend time together that didn't require much talking or pretending everything was okay. They could just sit side by side, lines in the water, and let the world exist around them without demanding anything. Sarah chattered happily as they walked to their usual spot, a section of public pier that jutted out into the bay far from the working marina. She talked about school, about her friend Mia's upcoming birthday party, about a book she was reading about a girl who discovered she could talk to dolphins. "Do you think people can really talk to animals?" she asked as Jake baited her hook. "Like actually understand them?" "I think animals and people understand each other better than we give them credit for," Jake said, casting her line out into the water. "Maybe not with words, but with feelings. You know how you can tell when someone's sad or happy just by looking at them? I think it's like that." Sarah considered this seriously, her nose scrunching up the way it always did when she was thinking hard. "Is that how you knew the lady and her boy needed help? In the water?" Jake's hands froze on his own fishing line. "What?" "In the water. When you saved them. Is that how you knew?" Sarah looked up at him with Emily's eyes. "Mrs. Chen said you were a hero. She saw it on the news." Of course she had. Jake had been hoping the story would die quickly, but he should have known better. Clearwater Bay was a small community, and news like this spread fast. "I heard them yelling," Jake said carefully, casting his own line. "That's how I knew they needed help." "But you jumped in even though it was dangerous, even though you could have died." Sarah's voice was very small. "Like Mom." Jake set down his rod and turned to face his daughter fully. "Sarah, look at me." When she did, he saw tears threatening. "What happened to your mom was an accident. A terrible, terrible accident. And yes, I jumped in to help those people, but I was careful. I knew what I was doing. I'm here, aren't I? I'm fine. But what if you weren't? What if you died too and I didn't have anyone?" The tears spilled over now, running down her cheeks. "What if I was all alone?" Jake pulled her into his arms, holding her tight while she cried into his shoulder. "You will never be alone," he said fiercely. "Never. I'm not going anywhere. I promise you that." "You can't promise that. Nobody can promise that. Mom probably promised too." The words hit him like a physical blow because she was right. Emily probably had promised. They'd all promised each other so many things, forever, always, until death do us part, and then death had come decades too early and made liars of them all. "You're right," Jake said quietly. "I can't promise I'll live forever. Nobody can. But I can promise that I will do everything in my power to stay alive and healthy and here with you for as long as possible. And I can promise that even if something did happen to me, you wouldn't be alone. Mrs. Chen loves you. Tommy and his wife love you. Your Aunt Rebecca would move here in a heartbeat to take care of you." "I don't want Aunt Rebecca. I want you. And you have me. Right here. Right now." He pulled back so he could look at her face. "I'm sorry I scared you. I didn't think about how hearing about the rescue would make you feel." Sarah wiped her nose on her sleeve. "Are you going to keep saving people? Is that going to be a thing now?" Despite everything, Jake smiled. "No, I'm not going to make a habit of it. I'm just going to keep being your boring dad who works on boats and makes terrible pancakes and can't remember the words to any of the songs you like." "Your pancakes aren't that terrible," Sarah said, and Jake knew they were going to be okay. They fished for another hour, not catching anything, but not really trying to either. The sun was warm, the bay was calm, and for a little while Jake could pretend that his life was simple and uncomplicated and not balanced on the edge of a decision that could change everything. But then his phone rang. He almost didn't answer it, didn't recognize the number, and telemarketing calls were a constant annoyance. But something made him pick up. "Jake? It's Olivia." Olivia Grant. His heart kicked against his ribs. Hi. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. I got your number from Tommy. I hope that's okay. It's fine. Jake glanced at Sarah, who was watching him with open curiosity. He stood and walked a few feet away, lowering his voice. Is everything okay? Is Eli? Eli's perfect. More than perfect. He hasn't stopped talking about you. He's decided you're his favorite person in the entire world, which is causing some jealousy issues with his grandmother. Olivia laughed, but it sounded slightly nervous. I'm calling because I wanted to follow up on our conversation yesterday about the position. I'm still thinking about it. I know, and I'm not trying to pressure you, but something's come up and I wanted to discuss it with you before you make your decision. Jake felt a sinking sensation in his stomach. Here it came, the catch, the complication, the thing that would make this too good to be true. What is it? The position I offered you is in New York. I didn't make that clear yesterday, but Grant Marine's headquarters are in Manhattan, and the Northeast Division operates out of our Brooklyn facility. The job would require relocating. New York, of course. Jake looked at Sarah, at the pier where they'd spent countless Saturday mornings, at the bay where he'd grown up, where Emily was buried, where every memory of his life, good and bad, was rooted. That's a pretty significant detail to leave out, he said, unable to keep the edge from his voice. I know. I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. I have a tendency to do that. Olivia paused. But Jake, before you say no, hear me out. The company would cover all relocation costs. We'd help you find housing, good housing, in a safe neighborhood with excellent schools. The salary I quoted you factors in New York's higher cost of living, and there's a support system in place for employees who are new to the area. You and Sarah wouldn't be on your own. Sarah loves it here. Her friends are here. Her school, her routine, everything she knows. I understand, and I'm not trying to minimize what I'm asking. It's huge, but kids are resilient, Jake. They adapt. And the opportunities in New York, the museums, the culture, the educational programs, those are things that could really benefit her. Jake closed his eyes, pressing his free hand to his forehead. I need time. Of course, take all the time you need, but... She hesitated. Can I ask you something? Sure. What's really holding you back? Is it just the location or is it something else? The question was too perceptive, too direct. Jake found himself answering honestly before he could think better of it. I don't want to owe you anything. Silence on the other end of the line. Then softly, you wouldn't. That's not how this works. Isn't it? You're offering me this amazing opportunity because I pulled you out of the water. If that hadn't happened, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You're right, Olivia said. If you hadn't saved my life, we wouldn't be having this conversation, but not for the reason you think. If you hadn't saved my life, I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have seen what kind of man you are. Someone who acts without hesitation when others need help, who works hard, who raises his daughter on his own, who's competent and skilled and exactly what my company needs. The rescue brought us together, but the job offer is based on merit. You barely know me. I know enough. And you'd be surprised how good I am at reading people. It's kind of essential in my line of work. She paused. I'm going to be in Clearwater for the next few days. Business meetings. Would you let me take you and Sarah to dinner? Nothing formal. Just a chance for you to ask questions, for Sarah to meet Eli. They're close in age. They might hit it off. No pressure about the job. Just dinner. Every instinct Jake had told him to say no. To keep his distance. To protect the small, safe life he'd built from this whirlwind that had blown in on a yacht. But he heard himself say, okay, dinner. Really? Olivia sounded genuinely surprised and pleased. Really? But I picked the place, and I pay for my and Sarah's meals. Jake, those are my conditions. He could hear the smile in her voice when she answered. Deal. When works for you? Tomorrow night, 6 o'clock? Perfect. Text me the address. And Jake? Thank you. After she hung up, Jake stood for a long moment staring at his phone. What was he doing? Why had he agreed to this? He was just setting himself up for more complications, more difficult decisions, more ways for this situation to go wrong. Dad? Sarah called. Are you okay? He turned back to her, pasting on a smile. I'm fine, sweetie. That was just someone from work. You look weird. Gee, thanks. No, I mean, Sarah scrunched up her nose. You look happy weird. Or maybe scared happy. It's hard to tell. Jake walked back to her and ruffled her hair. How would you like to go to dinner tomorrow night? There's someone I want you to meet. Who? A little boy named Eli. He's about your age and his mom. Sarah's eyes went wide. Is this like a date? Are you dating someone? What? No, it's not a date. It's complicated. That's what adults always say when they don't want to explain things to kids. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't always notice. Sarah grinned at him. Okay, I'll go to dinner. But if this lady is weird, or if her kid is annoying, I'm going to tell you. Fair enough. That night, after Sarah was asleep, Jake sat at his kitchen table with a beer he wasn't really drinking, and Olivia's business card laid out in front of him like a tarot card that could predict his future. His laptop was open, an old, slow machine that took 5 minutes to boot up, and he'd spent the last hour researching Grant Marine Industries. What he'd found both impressed and intimidated him. The company was massive, with operations spanning 3 continents. Olivia had taken over as CEO 6 years ago after her father's death, and under her leadership, the company had expanded by 40%. She was respected in her industry, known for being tough but fair, innovative, willing to take calculated risks. She was also, according to several articles, fiercely protective of her privacy. There were very few photos of her, and almost none of Eli. The divorce from her ex-husband had been handled quietly, with no tabloid drama. She seemed to live her life with the same no-nonsense efficiency she brought to her business. Jake clicked through to the company's career page and found the job posting for Fleet Maintenance Supervisor, Northeast Division. The requirements were extensive. 5 years of experience in marine mechanics, knowledge of various engine types, ability to manage teams, familiarity with safety protocols and regulations. He met most of them, but not all. The posting had been up for 3 months, which meant they were having trouble filling it. Was he really qualified, or was Olivia bending the requirements because of what he'd done? His phone buzzed with a text. Olivia. I forgot to ask earlier, does Sarah have any food allergies or dietary restrictions? Want to make sure wherever you pick is somewhere she can actually eat. Jake smiled despite himself and typed back. She'll eat anything except mushrooms. Says they taste like dirt. Smart kid. Eli says the same thing. Tomorrow at 6. There's a place called The Catch on Harbor Street. Nothing fancy, but the food's good and they have a kids menu. Sounds perfect. See you then. Jake set down his phone and took a sip of his beer, finally, letting the cold liquid settle his nerves. He was doing this. He was having dinner with a woman who'd offered him a life-changing job, introducing his daughter to her son, taking a step towards something he couldn't quite name and didn't fully understand. The smart move would be to cancel. To text her back and say he'd changed his mind, that he appreciated the offer, but it wasn't right for them, that she should find someone else for the position. But he didn't. Sunday evening came faster than Jake expected. He'd spent the day cleaning the apartment, doing laundry, and trying not to think too hard about the dinner ahead. Sarah had asked approximately 800 questions about Eli and his mother, ranging from, how old is he exactly, to does he like dinosaurs, to is his mom going to expect me to be polite the whole time? Yes, she's going to expect you to be polite, Jake had said to that last one. That's generally how dinners work. But like super polite. Or normal polite. Normal polite. Just be yourself. Now, standing in front of his closet trying to decide what to wear, Jake wished someone would give him the same advice. Be yourself. Except he wasn't sure who that was anymore. The guy who worked on boats and came home smelling like diesel? The father who could barely make rent? The man who'd once had dreams and ambitions before life had beaten them out of him? He settled on dark jeans and a button-down shirt, nicer than his work clothes but not trying too hard. Sarah had chosen a purple dress with leggings and her favorite sneakers, the ones with sparkles. She'd insisted on brushing her own hair, which meant it was slightly crooked, but Jake didn't have the heart to tell her. The Catch was busy when they arrived, filled with the Sunday dinner crowd. Families, couples, groups of friends enjoying the last night before the work week began. Jake spotted Olivia and Eli immediately at a corner booth. Olivia wore jeans and a simple blue sweater, her hair down around her shoulders, looking nothing like the CEO he'd researched online and everything like a regular mom out for dinner with her kid. Eli saw them first and waved enthusiastically, nearly knocking over his water glass in his excitement. Sarah's hand tightened around Jake's as they approached. "You okay?" he murmured. "What if he doesn't like me?" "He's gonna love you. You're pretty lovable, kid." Olivia stood as they reached the table, her smile warm and genuine. "Jake, Sarah, I'm so glad you could make it." "Thanks for inviting us," Jake said, aware that his voice sounded stiff, formal. "This is Eli. Eli, this is Sarah, Jake's daughter. And you remember Jake?" "You're the window breaker," Eli said to Jake, but his eyes were on Sarah. "Hi, I'm Eli. Do you like dinosaurs?" Sarah's face lit up. "I love dinosaurs. My favorite is the velociraptor." "Mine too. Mom says they were actually really small and had feathers, but in the movies they're huge and scary." "That's because movies aren't always scientifically accurate," Sarah said seriously. And just like that, the two kids were deep in conversation about the paleontological inaccuracies of Jurassic Park. Olivia caught Jake's eye and smiled. "Well, that was easier than expected." They slid into the booth, Jake and Sarah on one side, Olivia and Eli on the other. The kids continued their animated discussion while Jake tried to figure out what to do with his hands. "You look nervous," Olivia said quietly. "I don't do this much. Social situations with people I don't know well." "Is that what this is? A social situation?" "I don't know what this is," Jake admitted. Olivia opened her menu, her expression thoughtful. "It's dinner with new friends, that's all. No hidden agenda, no pressure, just people eating food and talking. The job is completely separate from this. Whether you take it or not, whether you even want to discuss it or not, doesn't affect tonight. Tonight is just about Eli getting to properly thank the man who saved his life, and me getting to know the person behind the heroics." She met his eyes. "Is that okay?" Jake felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. "Yeah, that's okay." The waitress came by to take their orders: fish and chips for the kids, grilled salmon for Olivia, the catch of the day for Jake. As they waited for their food, conversation flowed more easily than Jake had expected. Olivia asked Sarah about school, and Sarah launched into a detailed explanation of the solar system project she was working on. Eli interjected with his own knowledge about planets, and soon the two kids were debating whether Pluto should still be considered a planet. "What do you think?" Olivia asked Jake. "Team Pluto or Team 8 planets?" "I think I'm glad I don't have to make these decisions," Jake said, and she laughed. "Diplomatic answer." "I have to be diplomatic. Sarah feels very strongly about Pluto's demotion. She wrote a letter to NASA when she was 7, demanding they reinstate it." "Did they respond?" "They sent her a very nice form letter explaining the definition of a planet. She keeps it on her bulletin board as evidence of institutional injustice." Olivia's laugh was genuine, reaching her eyes. "She sounds like Eli. He wrote to the president last year asking why we don't have flying cars yet. He was very disappointed with the response." The food arrived, and they ate while the conversation continued. Jake found himself relaxing, actually enjoying the evening. Olivia was easy to talk to, funny, self-deprecating, willing to laugh at herself. She told stories about Eli's antics that had Jake grinning, and she listened intently when he shared stories about Sarah's precociousness. At one point, while the kids were absorbed in drawing on the paper tablecloth with crayons the restaurant provided, Olivia said quietly, "Thank you for giving this a chance." "Giving what a chance?" "This. Letting me into your life a little. I know it's not easy." She paused. "For what it's worth, I looked into you. Not in a creepy way, just in a due diligence way, and I found out about your wife, about the accident. I'm sorry." Jake's jaw tightened. "That's not something I like to talk about." "I understand, but I wanted you to know that I know, and that I understand why trusting someone new might be difficult." "You don't know anything about it," Jake said more harshly than he intended. Sarah's head came up, her expression worried, and he forced himself to soften his voice. "Sorry, it's not something I discuss with people." "Of course, I apologize. I shouldn't have brought it up." Olivia looked genuinely contrite. "Can we start over? Pretend I didn't just put my foot in my mouth? Jake took a breath, then nodded. Yeah, we can start over. The rest of the dinner passed pleasantly, the earlier tension dissipating. By the time they were finished, Sarah and Eli were clearly on their way to becoming friends. They'd exchanged favorite colors, favorite foods, favorite TV shows, and had discovered a shared love of both dinosaurs and outer space. Outside the restaurant, as they prepared to part ways, Eli tugged on Jake's sleeve. Will we see you again? Jake glanced at Olivia, then back at the boy. I don't know, buddy. Your mom and I are still figuring some things out. But you'll try, please. Those blue eyes were impossible to resist. Yeah, I'll try. Eli's face split into a huge grin, and he threw his arms around Jake's waist in another of those surprising hugs. Over the boy's head, Jake met Olivia's gaze. She was watching them with an expression that was part gratitude, part something else he couldn't quite identify. Thank you, she mouthed silently. In the car on the way home, Sarah was unusually quiet. Jake glanced over at her. You okay, sweetheart? Eli's nice, and his mom seems really nice, too. They are nice. Are we going to see them again? Would you want to? Sarah chewed on her lower lip, a habit she'd picked up from Emily. Yeah, I think so. Eli knows a lot about space, and he said his mom has a telescope at their house in New York, and sometimes they look at planets. That sounds cool. Dad? Sarah's voice was small. Why did you get all weird when she mentioned Mom? Jake's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I didn't get weird. Yes, you did. You got all stiff and your voice got different. She paused. It's okay to talk about Mom, you know, with other people. You don't have to keep her a secret. I'm not keeping her a secret, baby. It's hard, talking about what happened. Maybe it would be less hard if you did it more. Out of the mouths of babes. Jake reached over and squeezed Sarah's hand. Maybe you're right. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise, you just don't always listen. Later that night, after Sarah was in bed, Jake's phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Thank you for tonight. Eli hasn't stopped talking about Sarah. He wants to know if they can be pen pals. Jake smiled and typed back. Sarah suggested the same thing. I think we can arrange that. Good. And Jake, I meant what I said earlier. No pressure about the job. Take whatever time you need to decide. The offer stands regardless. He stared at the message for a long moment, then typed. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why me? Really, there have to be hundreds of people more qualified for this position. People already in New York, people with more experience. Why are you so determined to give this job to someone you just met? The three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, her response came through. Because when I saw you jump into that water, I saw someone who didn't hesitate, who didn't calculate the risk or think about what he might lose, who just acted because someone needed help. That's rare, Jake. That quality, that immediate, selfless response, that's something you can't teach. And it's something I want in my company. People who care more about doing the right thing than protecting themselves. Does that answer your question? Jake read the message 3 times, feeling something shift in his chest. Yeah, it does. Good. Now get some sleep. And think about it. Really think about it. Not about what you're afraid of, but about what you could gain. He didn't respond, just set the phone down and sat in the darkness of his living room. Through the window, he could see the lights of the bay, the boats gently rocking in their slips, the life he'd built from the ashes of his old one. It was safe. It was predictable. It was small. And maybe, Jake thought, maybe that was the problem. Maybe he'd been so focused on not losing anything else that he'd forgotten how to gain anything. Maybe he'd been so busy protecting himself and Sarah from more pain that he'd closed them off from possibility. His phone buzzed one more time. Another text from Olivia, just 3 words. Be brave, Jake. He closed his eyes and let himself imagine it. New York, a job that paid enough to give Sarah everything she deserved. A chance to be more than just the guy who survived, who got by, who kept his head down and his expectations low. A chance to be brave. Jake didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed watching shadows move across his ceiling, his mind spinning through possibilities and fears in equal measure. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw two futures branching out before him like roads diverging in a wood. One was familiar, the steady grind of marina work, the small apartment, the careful budgeting, the safe predictability of a life that asked nothing more of him than to show up and survive. The other was terrifying in its brightness. New York, opportunity, the chance to give Sarah more, but also the risk of spectacular failure. By dawn, he still hadn't decided anything. He made coffee, checked on Sarah, and sat at his kitchen table watching the sunrise over the bay. His phone sat silent beside his mug. No new messages from Olivia. She was giving him space, he realized, letting him come to his own conclusion without pressure. It was both a relief and somehow more terrifying. Monday morning at the marina felt different. Jake moved through his usual tasks with mechanical efficiency, but his mind was elsewhere. Tommy noticed immediately. "You've checked that same fuel line 3 times, Tommy said, appearing beside Jake on the deck of a charter boat. "Either you're turning into a perfectionist or something's eating at you." Jake straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. "Just distracted." "This about the job offer?" Jake's head snapped up. "How did you... Please, you think Olivia Grant called here asking about you without me figuring out she was up to something?" Tommy crossed his arms, his expression somewhere between amused and concerned. "She asked a lot of questions about your work ethic, your skills, your reliability. Woman was doing her homework. She offered me a position in New York, fleet maintenance supervisor." Tommy's eyebrows shot up. "That's a hell of an offer." "Yeah. So why do you look like someone just told you the world is ending?" Jake sat down heavily on the boat's bench seat, suddenly exhausted despite the early hour. "Because I don't know if I can do it. The job, the move, all of it. What if I uproot Sarah's entire life and then I fail? What if I get there and realize I'm in over my head? I'm a dock worker, Tommy. I fix engines and tie knots. I don't supervise teams or manage budgets or deal with corporate executives." Tommy was quiet for a moment, then sat down beside him. "You remember when I hired you 3 years ago after Emily died?" "Of course." "You were a mess, understandably. But you showed up every day, learned fast, worked harder than anyone I'd ever seen. Within 6 months, you knew more about these boats than guys who'd been doing it for 20 years. Tommy paused. "You think that happened by accident? You're smart, Jake. You're capable. You've just convinced yourself you're not, because staying small feels safer." The words hit harder than Jake expected. "I have Sarah to think about. It's not just about me." "No, it's not. It's about giving that little girl the best life possible. And maybe, just maybe, that means taking a risk." Tommy stood, brushing off his pants. "But that's your call to make. Just don't let fear make it for you." Jake spent his lunch break walking along the pier, his phone heavy in his pocket. He thought about calling Olivia, but what would he say? He still didn't have an answer. Instead, he found himself dialing a different number. "Jake?" His sister Rebecca's voice was surprised. They didn't talk often. She lived in Seattle, worked in tech, had a life that was busy and full, and didn't leave much room for checking in on her widowed brother. But when they did talk, she was always honest, sometimes brutally so. "Hey, Becca, got a minute?" "For you? Always. What's wrong?" "Why does something have to be wrong?" "Because you never call unless something's wrong." "Is it Sarah? Are you okay?" "We're both fine. I just..." Jake paused, gathering his thoughts. "I need advice." He told her everything. The rescue, Olivia, the job offer, his doubts and fears. Rebecca listened without interrupting, which was unlike her. When he finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Rebecca, you still there?" "I'm here. I'm just trying to figure out how to say this without sounding like a jerk." She took a breath. "Jake, you've been hiding for 4 years, and I get it. Emily's death was devastating, but you can't use it as an excuse to stop living forever." "I'm not hiding." "Yes, you are. You're working a job you're overqualified for, living in an apartment that's too small, and telling yourself it's noble sacrifice when really, it's just fear." Her voice softened. "I loved Emily too. She was the best sister-in-law I could have asked for, but she wouldn't want this for you. She wouldn't want you playing it safe, making yourself small, teaching Sarah that the world is something to be afraid of. Jake's throat tightened. I'm not teaching her that. Aren't you? When was the last time you took a real risk? When was the last time you reached for something you wanted instead of just accepting what you had? He didn't have an answer for that. Look, Rebecca continued, I don't know this Olivia woman. Maybe she's offering you this job out of genuine need, maybe it's gratitude, maybe it's both. But does it matter? If the job is real, if the opportunity is real, why does the reason behind it change anything? Because I don't want to be someone's charity case. Then don't be. Go there and be excellent at the job. Prove you deserve it. That's how you turn gratitude into respect. She paused. And Jake? Moving to New York doesn't mean forgetting Emily. It means moving forward. There's a difference. After they hung up, Jake stood at the end of the pier watching boats come and go. A fishing vessel was heading out for the afternoon run, its engine rumbling with power. He'd worked on that engine just last week, replacing worn belts and adjusting the timing. The captain had been impressed with how much better it ran, had told Tommy that Jake had a gift for understanding how things worked. Maybe Rebecca was right. Maybe he'd been selling himself short, convincing himself he was less capable than he actually was because it was easier than risking failure. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah's school. Parent-teacher conference scheduled for Thursday at 3 p.m. Please confirm attendance. Jake confirmed, then texted Mrs. Chen to see if she could pick Sarah up that day. Another text came through almost immediately, this one from an unknown number. Hi, Mr. Jake. This is Eli. Mom gave me Sarah's number and I wrote her a letter. Do you think she'll write back? Jake smiled despite his complicated thoughts. He saved Eli's number and responded. I'm sure she will. She loved meeting you too. Mom says you're thinking about moving to New York. I hope you do. We could be friends. The simple honesty of children. No calculation, no hidden agendas, just straightforward truth. Eli wanted them to move to New York because he'd made a friend and wanted to keep her. I'm thinking about it, Jake typed back. No decisions yet. Okay, but I'm hoping really hard. Jake pocketed his phone and headed back to work, but his mind kept circling back to the same questions. What did he want? Not what was safe, not what was expected, but what did he actually want? The answer, when it came, was so simple he almost laughed. He wanted more. For Sarah, yes, but also for himself. He wanted to be more than the guy who survived tragedy. He wanted to be someone who built something new from the ashes, who showed his daughter that setbacks didn't have to be the end of the story. He wanted to be brave. Thursday's parent-teacher conference arrived faster than Jake expected. He showed up at Sarah's school in his work clothes, having come straight from the marina, and found her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, waiting in a classroom decorated with student artwork and inspirational posters. Mr. Turner, thank you for coming. Mrs. Patterson was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who'd spent decades dealing with children. Please, sit. Jake sat in a chair designed for someone half his size, his knees nearly touching his chest. Is everything okay with Sarah? She's not in trouble? Oh no, nothing like that. Sarah's a wonderful student, bright, curious, well-behaved. Mrs. Patterson pulled out a folder. I wanted to talk to you about some concerns I've noticed recently. Jake's stomach dropped. What kind of concerns? Social ones, primarily. Sarah is well-liked by her peers, but she doesn't seem to form close friendships. She's always pleasant, but keeps people at arm's length. In class discussions, she's engaged, but when we do group projects, she tends to work alone unless specifically assigned to a partner. Mrs. Patterson's expression was gentle. I've taught long enough to recognize when a child is protecting themselves emotionally. Sarah is a textbook example. Jake felt like he'd been punched in the gut. I didn't realize. Most parents don't. Children are remarkably good at hiding their coping mechanisms. She paused. May I speak frankly? Please. Sarah lost her mother at a very young age. That kind of loss creates a fear of attachment. If you love someone, they can be taken away. So the child learns not to love too deeply, not to need too much, not to depend on anyone they might lose. Mrs. Patterson leaned forward. It's a survival mechanism, but it's not a way to live. Jake's hands clenched into fists on his knees. What am I supposed to do? I can't bring her mother back. No, but you can show her that it's safe to open up again, that taking risks on relationships, on friendships, on new experiences is worth it even if it's scary. She smiled slightly. Children learn by example, Mr. Turner. If Sarah sees you playing it safe, avoiding connection, staying in your comfort zone, that's what she'll learn to do. The words echoed Rebecca's so closely that Jake wondered if there was some kind of conspiracy. Has Sarah talked to you about me? Only in general terms. But I've been doing this long enough to read between the lines. Mrs. Patterson pulled out a drawing from the folder. She made this in art class last week. I thought you should see it. Jake took the paper. It was a crayon drawing of two figures, a man and a girl, standing on what looked like a pier. The sky was gray, the water was gray, and both figures had small, careful smiles that didn't reach their eyes. In the corner, barely visible, was a third figure, a woman made of light blue and white, more ghost than person, watching the other two from a distance. She titles it, My Family, Mrs. Patterson said softly. What do you see? Jake saw what he'd been too blind or too stubborn to see before. He saw his daughter's grief rendered in primary colors. He saw how small she'd made herself in him, how washed out and colorless their world was. He saw Emily hovering at the edges, unable to fully leave, keeping them trapped in the moment of loss. We're stuck, he said, his voice rough. You're surviving, but surviving isn't the same as living. Mrs. Patterson took back the drawing, tucking it carefully into the folder. I'm not trying to tell you how to parent your child, Mr. Turner, but I'm telling you that Sarah needs more than safety. She needs to see that life can be big and colorful and full of possibility again. She needs permission to move forward. Jake left the school in a daze, Mrs. Patterson's words ringing in his ears. He sat in his truck in the parking lot, his hands on the steering wheel, and finally let himself face the truth he'd been avoiding. He'd been so focused on protecting Sarah from more loss that he'd trapped them both in amber. They went through the motions of life, school, work, dinner, sleep, repeat. But they weren't really living. They were ghosts haunting their own existence, afraid to color outside the lines in case the universe noticed and took something else away. That night, after dinner and homework and all the comfortable routines, Jake sat down with Sarah on the couch. Can we talk about something important? He asked. Sarah looked up from the book she'd been reading, immediately alert. Are you sick? Are we moving? Did someone die? No, nothing like that. Jake took a breath. I talked to Mrs. Patterson today. Sarah's face shuddered. I'm not in trouble. She said I'm doing good in class. You're not in trouble. But she did say some things that made me think. He paused, choosing his words carefully. How would you feel about a big change? A really big one? What kind of change? What if we moved to New York? And I took that job with Olivia's company. Sarah stared at him, her eyes huge. Really? You mean really? I'm considering it, but I wanted to know what you thought. It would mean leaving Clearwater Bay, leaving your school, your friends, everything familiar. I don't really have friends, Sarah said quietly. Not close ones. Not like Eli could be. The admission broke Jake's heart. Why didn't you tell me? She shrugged, a gesture so reminiscent of him it was painful. Because you worry enough already. I didn't want to make it worse. Oh, baby. Jake pulled her into his arms. You're not supposed to protect me. I'm supposed to protect you. Can't we protect each other? He held her tighter. Yeah, we can do that. They sat in silence for a moment, then Sarah pulled back to look at him. Would we really move to New York, like the actual city with the tall buildings and everything? Well, we'd probably live in one of the boroughs. Brooklyn, maybe. But yes, the actual New York. And you'd have a better job, with insurance and everything? The fact that his 9-year-old daughter knew to ask about insurance made Jake's chest ache. Yes, a much better job. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her face serious in the way it got when she was thinking something through. Would we forget about Mom? There it was, the real question underneath all the others. Never, Jake said fiercely. We could never forget about Mom. She's part of us. She's in your laugh and your stubbornness and the way you scrunch your nose when you're thinking. Moving to New York doesn't change that. Nothing changes that. But it would be different. Our life would be different. Yeah, it would be different. Good different or bad different? Jake thought about Mrs. Patterson's words, about Rebecca's challenge, about Olivia's text telling him to be brave. He thought about the gray, washed-out family in Sarah's drawing and the ghost of Emily keeping them trapped in grief. I think it could be good different, he said honestly, but it would also be scary. New city, new school for you, new job for me. We'd have to be brave. Sarah looked down at her hands, then back up at him. Mom was brave. She used to tell me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the thing even though you're scared. She was right. So maybe we should be brave too, like her. Jake felt tears prick his eyes. Maybe we should. Okay, Sarah said with the decisive tone of someone who'd made up her mind. Let's do it. Let's move to New York. Just like that? Just like that. She paused. But can we bring all my stuffed animals? Even the ones I don't play with anymore? Despite everything, Jake laughed. Yes, we can bring all your stuffed animals. That night after Sarah was asleep, Jake sat at his kitchen table with his phone in his hand. It was late, past 11, but he knew what he needed to do. He pulled up Olivia's number and typed out a text, deleting and rewriting it 3 times before settling on something simple. Are you still awake? The response came almost immediately. Yes, everything okay? I've made a decision about the job. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. And? Jake took a deep breath and typed. I want to accept, if the offer's still open. His phone rang 10 seconds later. You're serious? Olivia's voice was breathless, excited. I'm serious. Sarah and I talked about it. We want to do this. Jake stood, pacing his small kitchen. I'm terrified, and I'm probably going to second-guess this decision 100 times between now and when we actually move, but yes, I'm saying yes. Jake, that's wonderful. She paused, and he heard her take a shaky breath. I'm so glad. For you, for Sarah, and selfishly for me and Eli, too. There are conditions, Jake said quickly. I need time to get things in order here. Give notice at the marina, arrange movers, find a place to live in New York. At least a month, maybe 6 weeks. Of course, take whatever time you need. And Jake? About housing, I know you want to do this on your own, but let me help. Not because of charity, but because I know New York and you don't. Let me connect you with a good realtor, someone who can help you find a safe neighborhood with good schools within your budget. Please. Jake wanted to argue, but he was learning to recognize when his pride was getting in the way of practicality. Okay. That would actually be really helpful. Good. I'll have Richard send you some information tomorrow. She paused. How are you feeling? Honestly, like I might throw up. Olivia laughed. That's normal. Making big life changes is terrifying. But Jake, I think you're doing the right thing, for both of you. I hope so. I know so. Her voice was warm, confident. Get some sleep. We'll talk details tomorrow. And Jake, thank you for trusting me, for trusting this. After they hung up, Jake stood at his kitchen window looking out at the bay. The water was calm tonight, reflecting the lights of the boats and buildings in rippling patterns. This view, this place, had been his whole world for so long. In a few weeks, it would be his past. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity and emotion. Jake gave his notice at the marina, and Tommy threw him an impromptu going-away party that left Jake both touched and slightly overwhelmed by how many people actually cared about him. He'd thought of himself as a loner, someone who kept to himself, but apparently he'd made more connections than he realized. You better come back and visit, Tommy said, crushing him in a bear hug. And if that fancy corporate job doesn't work out, you've always got a place here. Thanks, Tommy, for everything. You gave me a job when I needed one. That's not something I'll forget. You earned every day of it. Now go show those New York folks what real work ethic looks like. Packing the apartment was harder than Jake expected. Every item held memories. Emily's favorite coffee mug that Jake still couldn't bring himself to throw away. The blanket they'd bought together when Sarah was born. Photos from their too-short marriage. Sarah found him one evening sitting on the floor surrounded by photo albums, tears streaming silently down his face. "Dad?" She sat down beside him, taking his hand. "Are you okay?" "Just remembering," he managed. "Look at this one. This is from our first date. Your mom made me take her to an arcade. She beat me at every single game." Sarah looked at the photo. A younger Jake with his arm around a laughing Emily, both of them holding prize tickets. She was pretty. She was beautiful, inside and out. "Do you think she'd be proud of us for doing this?" Jake pulled Sarah close. "Yeah, baby, I think she'd be really proud." The realtor Olivia connected him with was a whirlwind of efficiency named Marcus, who had 3 kids of his own and understood exactly what Jake needed. After several video tours, they found a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. Park Slope, Marcus said. Great schools and family-friendly. It was more expensive than Jake's current place, but still within budget with his new salary. It had hardwood floors, big windows, and a small balcony. Sarah declared it perfect. Olivia called every few days to check in, offering help without being pushy, answering questions about the job and the city. Eli and Sarah had become pen pals in earnest, writing each other letters that Sarah made Jake mail with actual stamps because email isn't the same. "He drew me a picture of a T-Rex," Sarah announced one evening, showing Jake a crayon drawing that was barely recognizable as a dinosaur. "He says there's a natural history museum in New York with real dinosaur bones, and he'll take me to see them." "That sounds fun." "Do you think Olivia is nice because she likes you, or because she feels like she has to be?" The question caught Jake off guard. "What do you mean?" Sarah shrugged, coloring in a picture at the kitchen table. "Jenny at school says when adults are extra nice, it's because they want something. Is Olivia being nice because she wants you to take the job or because she actually likes us?" It was a fair question, and one Jake had asked himself more than once. "I think both can be true. She wanted me to take the job, yes, but I also think she genuinely likes us." "Why do you ask?" "Because I like her. And I like Eli, and I don't want to get there and find out it was all fake." Jake set down the dish he was washing and knelt beside Sarah's chair. "Life's complicated, sweetheart. People can have multiple reasons for doing things, but I don't think Olivia's being fake. I think she's grateful, yes, but I also think she sees something in us worth knowing. Does that make sense?" "I guess," Sarah went back to her coloring. "I'm still going to be careful, just in case." Smart kid. Maybe too smart for her own good sometimes. 3 days before the move, Mrs. Chen threw them a goodbye dinner. She'd invited half the building, and Jake's small apartment was packed with neighbors he'd barely spoken to, but who all had kind words and well wishes. Mrs. Chen cried, which made Sarah cry, which almost made Jake cry until he managed to get himself under control. "You take care of that little girl," Mrs. Chen said, gripping his hands. "And you take care of yourself, too. Don't forget to live, Jake. Not just survive. Live." Everyone seemed to have the same advice. Live. Be brave. Move forward. It was as if the universe was conspiring to push him toward this new life, burning all the bridges behind him so he couldn't retreat. The night before the movers came, Jake and Sarah sat on the balcony of their apartment watching the sun set over the bay one last time. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the water reflecting the colors like liquid light. "I'm going to miss this," Sarah said quietly. "Me too. But I'm also excited." "Is that okay? To be sad and excited at the same time?" Jake put his arm around her shoulders. "That's more than okay. That's exactly how you're supposed to feel when you're starting a new adventure." "Mom's coming with us, right? Like, in our hearts and stuff?" "Always. She's part of us. Nothing can change that." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deeper shades of purple and blue. Tomorrow, the movers would come. Tomorrow, they would pack their life into boxes and load it onto a truck. Tomorrow, they would say goodbye to Clearwater Bay and hello to an uncertain future. But tonight, they sat together watching the sunset, 2 people who had survived the worst and were finally ready to reach for something better. The drive to New York took 8 hours, their belongings following behind in a moving truck that Jake had paid for with his first advance from Grant Marine Industries. Sarah spent most of the journey with her face pressed to the window, watching the landscape shift from the familiar coastal towns of their old life to the increasingly urban sprawl that signaled their approach to the city. Jake's hands were tight on the steering wheel, his old Ford truck making concerning noises that he tried to ignore. "Just get us there," he pleaded silently with the vehicle. "One more trip and then you can rest." They hit traffic crossing into Brooklyn, the kind of gridlock that Jake had heard about but never experienced. Cars packed together like sardines, horns blaring, the air thick with exhaust, and the particular energy of millions of people all trying to get somewhere at once. Sarah's eyes went wide. "There are so many people," she breathed. "Dad, there are so many people." "Welcome to New York," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady, even as his heart hammered against his ribs. What had he done? This wasn't Clearwater Bay with its quiet streets and familiar faces. This was chaos, noise, overwhelming humanity pressed together in ways that made his small-town sensibilities scream. But then his phone rang through the truck's ancient speaker system, and Olivia's voice filled the cab. "Jake, where are you?" "Stuck in traffic about 2 miles from the apartment. This is insane." Her laugh was warm and understanding. "That's just Tuesday afternoon in Brooklyn. You'll get used to it. Listen, Eli and I are at your new place with some groceries and basic supplies. Marcus gave us the key. I hope that's okay." Jake felt something in his chest unclench slightly. "That's more than okay. Thank you. We're family now. That's what family does." After she hung up, Sarah looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. She said, "We're family." She was being nice. "No," Sarah said thoughtfully. "I think she meant it. She says things like she means them." The apartment building was a 3-story brownstone on a tree-lined street that somehow felt both utterly foreign and cautiously welcoming. Jake found parking, a miracle, according to the guy who'd just pulled out, and he and Sarah stood on the sidewalk staring up at their new home. "This is it," Jake said unnecessarily. Sarah slipped her hand into his. "Together?" "Together." They climbed the steps to the second floor, and before Jake could even knock, the door flew open. Eli stood there, his face split by an enormous grin, and behind him, Olivia smiled with an expression that was part welcome, part relief. "You made it!" Eli grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her inside. "Come see. Your room has a window that looks at a tree, and Mom says sometimes squirrels climb on it and you can watch them, and there's a park 2 blocks away with swings and everything." Sarah let herself be dragged away, laughing, and Jake found himself alone in the doorway with Olivia. She wore jeans and a simple t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, looking nothing like the CEO who ran a shipping empire, and everything like a friend who'd shown up to help. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." Jake stepped inside, looking around. The apartment was just as he'd seen in the video tours, but somehow better. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating hardwood floors and high ceilings. His furniture wouldn't arrive until tomorrow, but Olivia had set up air mattresses in both bedrooms and stocked the kitchen with essentials. "You didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to. I remember how overwhelming my first day in the city was, and I grew up an hour away." She gestured to the kitchen. "I made coffee. Figured you could use some." They sat at the kitchen counter on borrowed stools, drinking coffee while the sound of children's laughter echoed from Sarah's room. The moment felt surreal. Jake Turner, dock worker from Clearwater Bay, sitting in a Brooklyn apartment, drinking coffee with a woman who'd chartered a yacht just to thank him. "How are you really?" Olivia asked. "And I want the honest answer, not the brave face." Jake considered lying, then decided she deserved better. "Terrified. Excited. Wondering if I've made a huge mistake. Pretty sure I'm going to wake up and discover this is all a dream." "It's not a dream. Though I understand the feeling." She wrapped her hands around her mug. "Can I tell you something? I was terrified when I took over Grant Marine. My father had just died. I was 28 years old, and suddenly I was responsible for a company with thousands of employees and hundreds of millions in revenue. The board wanted to sell. The executive team thought I was too young. Everyone expected me to fail. But you didn't." "No, but not because I wasn't scared. I was scared every single day for the first year. I just didn't let the fear stop me. She met his eyes. You're going to do great, Jake. I know you don't believe it yet, but you will. Before Jake could respond, his phone rang. Tommy. You make it? Tommy's voice was warm through the speaker. Just got here. Sarah's already making herself at home. Good. And Jake? I'm proud of you, man. I know this wasn't easy. After he hung up, Jake found Olivia watching him with a thoughtful expression. You have good people in your life. I'm learning to let them in. Turns out I've been pretty bad at that. Well, you're letting me in. That's a start. The movers arrived the next morning at 7, and chaos descended. Jake directed traffic while Sarah alternated between excited supervision and getting in the way. Olivia had texted that she needed to work, but Richard appeared with coffee and pastries, his timing impeccable. Ms. Grant wanted to make sure you had fuel, Richard said, handing Jake a cup. She's in meetings all day but says she'll call this evening to check in. She doesn't need to do that. Richard smiled slightly. I've worked for Ms. Grant for 6 years. When she decides to care about something, there's no stopping her. Best to just accept it. By noon, the apartment was crammed with boxes and furniture in various states of assembly. Sarah had claimed her room and was arranging stuffed animals with the seriousness of a general positioning troops. Jake was attempting to assemble a bookshelf when his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Mr. Turner, this is David Chen. I'm the operations manager for Grant Marine's Brooklyn facility. Just wanted to welcome you aboard and go over some logistics for Monday. Monday, his first day. The reality hit Jake like a wave. David walked him through the basics. Where to report, what to bring, who he'd be meeting with. The team's excited to have you. We've been short-staffed for months. Your expertise is going to make a real difference. After the call, Jake sat on a box labeled Kitchen, his hands shaking slightly. This was really happening. In 3 days, he'd be supervising a team, making decisions that affected people's livelihoods, representing a company that had placed enormous trust in him. Dad? Sarah appeared in the doorway. You okay? Yeah, baby. Just thinking. Nervous thinking or excited thinking? Both. He pulled her close. How's your room coming? Good. I put Mom's picture on the nightstand, so she can see the tree too. Jake's throat tightened. That's perfect. That evening, after Richard had left and the apartment was starting to look more lived in than chaotic, there was a knock at the door. Jake opened it to find Olivia and Eli, both carrying bags. We brought dinner, Olivia announced. Figured you were too tired to cook. Plus, Eli's been asking to see Sarah literally every 30 seconds since we left yesterday. They spread Chinese food across Jake's newly assembled dining table, the first meal in the new apartment. Eli and Sarah chattered about school starting next week, about the park they'd explored, about everything and nothing. Jake and Olivia caught each other's eye across the table more than once, sharing small smiles that felt like a secret language developing. After dinner, while the kids played in Sarah's room, Jake and Olivia cleaned up in the kitchen. Thank you, Jake said quietly, for all of this. The apartment set up, the groceries, showing up with dinner. You've done so much. You saved my life, Jake, and Eli's. This is... She paused, shaking her head. This isn't repayment. That's not what this is. This is friendship. Or at least, I hope it could be. I'd like that. The words came easier than Jake expected. Good. Olivia handed him a dish to dry. Fair warning, I'm told I can be intense as a friend. I get invested in people. I meddle. Richard says I have boundary issues. Richard seems like he knows you pretty well. He's tolerated me for 6 years. That takes either extreme patience or mild insanity. She smiled. Probably both. The comfortable silence that followed was interrupted by squealing from Sarah's room. They looked in to find both children collapsed in giggles, some game having dissolved into laughter. They're good together, Olivia observed. Yeah, they are. Sarah seems happier than when we first met. Less guarded. Jake leaned against the doorframe, watching his daughter laugh with pure, uncomplicated joy. Someone told me recently that she's been protecting herself, keeping people at a distance so she couldn't lose them. I didn't realize I'd been teaching her that. You weren't teaching her. You were both surviving. Olivia's voice was gentle. But now you're both learning to live again. That's brave, Jake. I don't feel brave. I feel like I'm faking it and hoping no one notices. That's what bravery is, doing the thing that terrifies you even when you're sure you're going to fail. Monday morning arrived with the kind of anxiety-inducing speed that made Jake's stomach churn. He'd barely slept, running through scenarios and conversations in his head, trying to prepare for every possible disaster. Sarah had picked out his clothes the night before. Khakis and a button-down shirt, professional but not trying too hard. "You look good, Dad," she said at breakfast, her tone serious. Very boss-like. "I'm not the boss, I'm middle management." "Still counts." She hugged him tight. "You're going to be amazing, and if anyone's mean to you, tell me and I'll fight them." Jake laughed despite his nerves. "You're 9. I'm scrappy." The Grant Marine Brooklyn facility was housed in a converted warehouse near the waterfront, all exposed brick and modern renovations. Jake showed up 15 minutes early and was greeted by David Chen, who turned out to be an energetic man in his 40s with a handshake that could crack walnuts. "Jake, welcome, welcome. Come on, let me show you around." The facility was impressive. State-of-the-art equipment, organized workspaces, a team that clearly knew what they were doing. David introduced him to what felt like 50 people whose names Jake tried desperately to remember. Finally, they reached a small office with Jake's name already on the door. "This is you," David said. "Not fancy, but it's got a window. The team meets every morning at 8 to go over the day's priorities. You'll get the hang of it fast." The morning meeting was less terrifying than Jake had feared. His team of 15 ranged from grizzled veterans who'd been working on boats longer than Jake had been alive to young technicians fresh from maritime training programs. They sized him up with the kind of careful assessment that workers give new supervisors, and Jake felt the weight of their judgment. "I'm Jake Turner," he started, keeping it simple. "I've spent the last few years working marina maintenance in Clearwater Bay, but before that I grew up around boats. My dad was a commercial fisherman. I've been taking apart engines since I was 12. He paused. "I'm not going to pretend I know everything about how things work here, but I know boats, I know maintenance, and I'm a fast learner. I'm hoping you'll be patient with me while I get up to speed." An older man in the back, his name tag read Luis, crossed his arms. "You ever managed a team before?" "No, this is new for me, but I've been part of enough teams to know what makes a good supervisor and what makes a bad one. I'm going to try to be the first kind." Luis studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. Let's see what you got." The first week was a blur of learning, systems, protocols, paperwork, the rhythm of how the facility operated. Jake threw himself into it with the same dedication he'd brought to his marina work, staying late, asking questions, getting his hands dirty alongside his team when problems arose. He discovered that managing people was harder than fixing engines, but also more rewarding. When he helped solve a problem that had been plaguing the team for weeks, the collective satisfaction was addictive. Olivia called every evening to check in, ostensibly to see how he was adjusting, but really, Jake suspected, to make sure he wasn't drowning. He appreciated it more than he could articulate. "How was day 5?" she asked on Friday evening. "I didn't get fired, so I'm counting it as a win." "Jake, you're doing great. David's been sending me updates. The team loves you. The team tolerates me. There's a difference." "Give it time. Rome wasn't built in a day, and trust isn't either." Sarah had started at her new school, and Jake worried obsessively about how she was handling it. But when he picked her up that Friday afternoon, she bounced out talking about a girl named Maya who loved dinosaurs, and a boy named Chris who could solve Rubik's Cubes in under a minute. "I like it here," she announced in the truck. "It's different, but good different." "Yeah?" Relief flooded through him. "You're making friends?" "I'm trying. It's kind of scary, but Eli said being scared is okay as long as you keep trying anyway." "Eli's a smart kid. He wants to know if we can have a sleepover tomorrow, at their place. Olivia already said yes if you say yes." Jake's immediate instinct was to say no. Too soon, too much, too complicated. But he caught himself. That was the old Jake, the one who kept everyone at arm's length. The new Jake, the one trying to be brave, needed to try something different. "Sure," he heard himself say. "That sounds fun." The sleepover turned into dinner first, Olivia insisting they eat before the kids disappeared into Eli's room. Her apartment was in Manhattan, a space that screamed money and taste, floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the city, modern furniture, art on the walls that was probably worth more than Jake's truck. "Stop looking nervous," Olivia said, handing him a glass of wine. "It's just an apartment. It's a really nice apartment. It's where we live. That's all that matters." She led him to the balcony while the kids set up an elaborate pillow fort in the living room. The city spread out before them, lights beginning to twinkle as dusk fell. "How are you really doing? Week 1 in the books." Jake leaned against the railing, considering. "Better than I expected. The work is harder than I thought. Not the technical stuff, but the people management, but also more satisfying. You're a natural leader. You just didn't know it yet." "I don't know about that." "I do." Olivia's voice was firm. "I've seen the daily reports. Your team's efficiency is already up. Morale is up. You're solving problems that have been persistent issues for months. That doesn't happen by accident." Jake turned to look at her, really look at her. The setting sun painted her face in warm light, and something in his chest shifted. "Why do you believe in me so much?" "Because I see who you are, maybe more clearly than you see yourself." She met his gaze steadily. "You're capable, Jake. You're good at this. And more than that, you care. That combination is rare." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Jake couldn't quite name. Then Eli's voice called from inside. "Mom! Mr. Jake! We need judges for our fort competition." The spell broke, and they went inside to adjudicate the architectural merits of pillow constructions. Later, after Sarah had texted him to say goodnight from Eli's room where they were watching movies, Jake found himself alone with Olivia in her kitchen. "Thank you for tonight," he said, "for making this transition easier, for being, I don't even know what to call it, a friend, a mentor, a guardian angel?" Olivia laughed softly. "How about just Olivia? No labels required." She paused, seeming to gather her courage. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "When Eli and I went into that water, in those seconds before you broke through the window, I had this moment of absolute clarity. I thought about all the things I'd missed because I was too busy working, all the moments with Eli I'd sacrificed for meetings and deals, all the relationships I'd let wither because I put my career first." Her voice was quiet but steady. "And I thought, if I survive this, I'm going to live differently. I'm going to let people in. I'm going to take risks on things that matter, not just business, but life." And then I showed up. And then you showed up. This man who jumped in without hesitation, who risked everything for strangers, who reminded me what actual bravery looks like. She turned to face him fully. "You changed my life twice, Jake. Once when you saved it, and again when you showed me what really matters." Jake's heart was hammering. "Olivia! I'm not saying this to make you uncomfortable. I just wanted you to know. You think you owe me something for the job, for the help, but I'm the one who's grateful. You gave me back my son, you gave me perspective, and now you're giving me friendship. That's more than I could ever repay." They stood in the warm light of her kitchen, the city humming outside, two people who'd collided in tragedy and somehow found their way to something like hope. Jake reached out and took her hand, the gesture simple and profound. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for seeing me, for believing I could do this when I didn't believe it myself. That's what friends do. Is that what we are? Friends?" Olivia smiled, squeezing his hand. "I hope we're becoming something even better. Family. The kind you choose." 3 months passed in a blur of adjustment and growth. Jake settled into his role at Grant Marine, earning the respect of his team through competence and genuine care. Sarah thrived at her new school, her circle of friends expanding, her laughter coming easier. The apartment that had felt so strange became home, filled with new memories and comfortable routines. Jake and Olivia fell into a pattern of dinners together, weekend outings with the kids, late-night phone calls where they talked about everything and nothing. Slowly, carefully, something shifted between them, from gratitude to friendship to something neither was quite ready to name, but both felt growing. One Saturday in early December, Jake took Sarah and Eli to the Natural History Museum while Olivia worked on a major contract negotiation. They stood beneath the massive dinosaur skeletons, and Eli held Sarah's hand with the unconscious ease of children who'd become inseparable. "Dad?" Sarah tugged his sleeve. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you like Olivia? Like her?" Jake nearly choked. "What?" "It's okay if you do. I think she likes you too. Eli says his mom smiles different when you're around." "Sarah, it's complicated. Olivia is my boss and my friend, and you like her. I can tell. You get all weird and nervous when she's coming over, and you wear the good shirt." Sarah looked up at him with Emily's eyes. "It's okay, Dad. I'm not going to be mad or sad or whatever you're worried about. Mom would want you to be happy." "Would she?" The question came out before Jake could stop it. "Yeah, she would, because Mom loved you, and when you love someone, you want them to have good things." Sarah squeezed his hand. "Olivia is a good thing, and so is Eli. So is this whole new life. It's okay to be happy about it." Jake pulled her into a hug right there in the middle of the museum, not caring who saw. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just didn't notice because you were too busy being sad." That evening, after he'd dropped Eli back home, Jake found himself lingering at Olivia's door. She noticed. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah, Can we talk, just for a minute?" They sat in her living room, the city lights twinkling through the windows, and Jake tried to find the words for what he was feeling. "I'm happy," he said finally. "For the first time in years, I'm actually happy. Not just surviving, not just getting through the day, but genuinely happy. And it's because of you." Olivia's expression softened. "Jake, let me finish. I know this is complicated. You're my boss. You're the person who gave me this opportunity, and I don't want you to think I'm saying this because I feel obligated or grateful or—" He ran his hands through his hair, frustrated with his inability to articulate what felt so clear in his heart. "I care about you, not because you saved my career or because we've become friends, but because you're brilliant and kind and funny, and you make me want to be braver. You make me want to be more." "I care about you too," Olivia said quietly. "I have for a while, but I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want you to feel pressured. You're still finding your footing here, and I didn't want to complicate that." "Maybe complicated is okay. Maybe complicated is good." Jake moved closer. "I'm not asking for anything to change right now. I just needed you to know that this—" He gestured between them. "Whatever it is, it matters to me. You matter to me." Olivia reached out and took his hand, the same way he'd taken hers months ago in her kitchen. "You matter to me too, more than I probably should admit to my fleet maintenance supervisor." They both laughed, the tension breaking. "So what do we do?" Jake asked. "We take it slow. We figure it out as we go. We let whatever this is become whatever it's meant to be." She smiled. "And we definitely don't tell Eli and Sarah yet, or they'll have us married by Christmas." Agreed. But as Jake drove home that night, he couldn't stop smiling. The future that had seemed so terrifying 4 months ago now felt full of possibility. He'd taken the leap, left the safety of what he knew, and discovered that the risk had been worth it. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Did you tell her?" "How did you know?" "Because you've been weird all day and Eli said his mom's been weird too. So did you tell her you like her?" Jake smiled and typed back. "Yeah, I told her. And we're taking it slow, being careful, not rushing into anything." 3 dots appeared, then, "Boring, but okay. I'm proud of you for being brave, Dad." Jake's throat tightened. "I'm proud of you too, baby girl, for being brave with me." Christmas came, and Jake and Sarah spent it at Olivia's apartment. They debated whether it was too soon, too much, sending the wrong message, but the kids had begged, and neither adult had the heart to say no. They cooked dinner together. Well, Olivia and Jake cooked while Sarah and Eli made elaborate decorations and got underfoot, and it felt natural, right? Like a piece clicking into place. After the kids were asleep, their bellies full of cookies and hot chocolate, Jake and Olivia sat on her balcony wrapped in blankets against the December cold. "This has been the best Christmas I've had in years," Olivia said. "Thank you for sharing it with us. Thank you for inviting us, for making us part of your family." "Your family, Jake. You and Sarah both." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her. A year ago, if someone had told me my life would look like this, I wouldn't have believed them. I thought I had everything figured out. Career, success, raising Eli on my own. I thought that was enough. And now? Now I know I was missing this. Connection, partnership, the possibility of something more. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights, and Jake felt peace settle over him like snow. He thought about the storm, the sinking car, the split-second decision that had changed everything. He thought about Emily and how she'd want him to be happy. He thought about Sarah, thriving in ways he'd never imagined possible. He thought about his team at Grant Marine, about the satisfaction of work that challenged him, about the life he was building from the ashes of his old one. "Sometimes the ocean takes," Jake said quietly, remembering Olivia's words from months ago. "And sometimes it gives back." Olivia lifted her head to look at him. "What did it give back?" Jake smiled, pulling her closer. "Everything. It gave me everything." 6 months later, Jake stood on the deck of the Second Chance, now permanently docked in Brooklyn as part of Grant Marine's executive fleet. Sarah and Eli played on the bow, their laughter carrying on the wind. Olivia stood beside him, her hand in his, watching their children with a smile that still made his heart skip. "Your team hit another efficiency record this month," she said. "David wants to know if you'd be interested in the regional director position when it opens next year." "That's a big jump." "You're ready for it. Everyone sees it but you." Jake turned to face her fully. "A year ago, I was barely keeping my head above water. Now I'm standing here on a yacht, dating an incredible woman, watching my daughter thrive, and apparently being considered for promotions I never dreamed of. How did this become my life?" "You took a chance. You were brave." Olivia's eyes were warm. "And you let people in. You let me in." "Best decision I ever made." "Second best," she corrected. "First best was jumping in that water." "No," Jake said, pulling her close. "First best was not giving up. On myself, on Sarah, on the possibility that life could be good again. Everything else followed from that." Sarah called out to them, waving excitedly at something in the water. Eli was pointing, both kids animated with discovery. Jake and Olivia walked over to see what had captured their attention, a pod of dolphins, rare this close to the city, playing in the wake of a passing boat. "Look, Dad," Sarah's face was radiant. "They're dancing!" Jake watched the dolphins arc through the water, graceful and free, and felt something inside him finally fully release. The grief that had weighed him down for so long didn't disappear. It never would. But it no longer defined him. Emily would always be part of him, part of Sarah, but they'd learned to carry that love forward into new relationships, new experiences, new joy. "Yeah, baby girl," he said, wrapping one arm around his daughter and the other around Olivia. "They're dancing." The four of them stood together on the deck as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Two families that had found each other in the aftermath of near tragedy, rebuilt from broken pieces into something whole and new. Jake thought about the man he'd been a year ago, scared, stuck, surviving, but not living. He'd needed a storm to shake him awake, a sinking car to remind him that life was precious and short and meant to be lived fully. "Thank you," he said softly to Olivia. "For what?" "For seeing who I could be. For giving me the chance to become him." She squeezed his hand. "You were always him, Jake. You just needed permission to show it." As night fell over the bay and the city lights began their nightly performance, Jake Turner stood on the deck of a yacht named Second Chance and understood for the first time what that really meant. Not a do-over or erasure of the past, but an opportunity to write the next chapter, to take the lessons learned from loss and transform them into wisdom, to honor those you'd lost by living fully, by being brave, by opening your heart to new people and new possibilities. The ocean had taken Emily from him, had nearly taken Olivia and Eli, but it had also brought them all together, had given him this strange, beautiful, unexpected family. Life was like that, he realized, taking and giving in equal measure, challenging you to find meaning in both, to build something new from what remained. "Dad?" Sarah looked up at him, her face serious. "Are we going to be okay? Like, really okay?" Jake knelt down so he was eye level with his daughter. Yeah, baby girl, we're going to be more than okay. We're going to be happy. Promise? Promise. And for the first time in 4 years, Jake Turner made a promise he knew he could keep. Not because life would be easy or simple or free from pain, but because he'd learned that happiness wasn't the absence of struggle. It was the courage to keep reaching for joy despite it. It was the willingness to take risks, to be vulnerable, to let people in even when you were terrified of losing them. It was jumping into dark water because someone needed help, not knowing if you'd make it back to the surface. It was choosing to live, really live, when survival alone would have been easier. It was being brave. As the yacht rocked gently in the evening tide, Jake looked at the family surrounding him, chosen and given, broken and healed, complicated and perfect, and knew with absolute certainty that the storm had been worth it. Every moment of fear, every risk taken, every leap of faith had led him here, to this moment, to these people, to this life that he'd never imagined but couldn't now imagine living without. Sometimes you had to drown before you learned how to swim. Sometimes you had to sink before you could rise. Sometimes you had to lose everything before you understood what really mattered. And sometimes, if you were very lucky and very brave, the ocean gave you a second chance. Jake Turner had seized his with both hands and wasn't letting go.